She's got such potential, my mom gushed, while I stood outside, clutching my surgery estimate like a death sentence. They sent $80,000 to fund my sister's Paris degree, the exact amount I needed to survive. But what gutted me wasn't just the money. It was the voice, my father's. Calm as ever. You're strong. You'll figure something out. As if strength could replace a scalpel. As if survival was optional. They called it an investment in Lindsay's future. Mine? Apparently not worth saving. But what they forgot, what they never saw, is that I kept every receipt, every dollar I gave, every sacrifice I made. And now, I'm done playing strong. I'm going to play smart. My name is Elaine Kincaid, and I'm 45 years old. I've spent my adult life as our family's steady backbone, the one my parents called whenever bills came due or Lindsay needed help. My morning routine now revolves around sorting medications in my worn canvas tote, the sharp click of pill bottles keeping time with the hospital clock. Through the clinic's antiseptic haze, I study my calendar, its pages marked in urgent red ink. My sister Lindsay's latest postcard from Paris sits in my purse, another testament to her extraordinary potential, as Mom always says. But they don't know about the locked filing cabinet in my home office, filled with 20 years of carefully organized receipts, bank statements, and email records. Those papers tell a different story. But let me start from the beginning. Dr. Patel's consultation room was bright with morning sun, but the fluorescent lights still hummed overhead, making everything feel too sharp, too real. She sat across from me, her white coat crisp, her expression gentle but firm. You know that look doctors get when they're about to change your life? Yeah, that one. Mrs. Kincaid, she said, folding her hands on the desk. I need you to understand the severity of what we're dealing with. The light caught her name tag, making it flash like a warning sign. Without this surgery within the next 6 months, we're looking at permanent organ failure. The procedure itself is complex, but the success rates are excellent, if we can do it in time. I gripped my notepad tighter, the spiral binding digging into my palm. What's the total cost likely to be, doctor? She slid a paper across the desk. The number at the bottom made my throat close up. $84,000. Even with insurance, my portion would be massive. I know it's overwhelming, she said, but we need to schedule pre-operative testing soon. I've marked some dates here. She tapped my calendar with her pen, adding more red circles to the ones I'd already made for lab work. Ever organized, that's me. Even when my world's falling apart, I keep my appointments in perfect rows. The moment I left her office, I pulled out my phone and called Mom. My hands were shaking so badly I had to lean against the wall to dial. Mom, I said when she answered, trying to keep my voice steady. I just got out of the doctor's appointment. I need... My voice cracked. God, I hated asking for help. I need surgery soon, and it's more than I can handle, alone. There was a pause, and I could picture her in her kitchen, probably standing by the window where she always takes calls, looking out at her prize roses. Oh, sweetie, she said finally. Your father and I will figure something out. Don't worry. You know how hope feels? Like a life raft in rough waters. I clung to that promise as I walked home along Maple Street, the familiar crack in the sidewalk by old Mrs. Henderson's house catching my toe like always. The trees were just starting to turn, scattering yellow leaves across my path. I rehearsed my gratitude speech in my head. Mom, Dad, I can't tell you how much this means to me. I'll pay back every penny, I promise. Back home, I did what I always do when I'm scared. I organized. Spread everything out on my dining room table in neat columns. Current bills, medication costs, insurance paperwork. Made a list of possible lenders, just in case. The afternoon light faded to dusk while I worked, but I kept glancing at my phone. Surely they'd call back soon with details, right? By 7 o'clock, the shadows had grown long across my paperwork, and still no call. I stared at my phone until the screen blurred. Mom and Dad lived just 15 minutes away. Maybe this was a conversation better had in person anyway. I gathered my medical paperwork into a folder, The same kind I'd been using to document our family's financial history all these years. The irony wasn't lost on me. I grabbed my car keys, double-checked that I had Dr. Patel's estimates, and headed for the door. My parents had always come through before, in their own way. They'd figure something out. They had to. Standing in my driveway, keys in hand, I looked up at the evening sky. 6 months. The timeline echoed in my head like that fluorescent hum from Dr. Patel's office. 6 months to find the money, complete the pre-op testing, and undergo major surgery. 6 months to save my own life. I got into my car and turned the key. Time to find out exactly what my parents meant by figure something out. The streetlights were just flickering on as I pulled up to my parents' brick colonial. Same house, same neat flower beds, same brass knocker I'd polished every spring cleaning since I was 12. Amazing how something so familiar can suddenly feel like foreign territory when your whole world's tilting. Mom's prized hydrangeas nodded in the evening breeze as I walked up the path. Through the front window, warm lamplight spilled onto the porch, catching the edge of the family photos that lined the wall inside. Lindsay's face beamed from most of them. Graduation shots from high school and college, her winning that regional art competition, her study abroad semester in Rome. The images tracked her achievements like stepping stones, each one perfectly framed and positioned. My own photos were, well, let's just say they were harder to spot. Though there was that one from when I'd organized Dad's retirement party, tucked in the corner by the bookshelf. I'm in the background, checking the catering setup, while Lindsay poses with him center stage. The house smelled like lemon furniture, polish. Mom's Thursday ritual, regular as clockwork. Some things never change. I adjusted my grip on my medical folder, rehearsing one last time how to present the surgery estimates. That's when I heard her voice floating through the partially open window. "Oh, Carol, we're just over the moon." Mom's voice carried that special lilt she got when talking about Lindsay. The wire transfer went through yesterday. $80,000 for her. Master's program in Paris. Can you imagine? Our little girl studying art history at the Sorbonne. The porch tilted under my feet. $80,000. The exact amount I needed, practically to the dollar, already sent across the ocean. While I stood here holding a folder full of survival calculations, Lindsay was probably browsing Parisian apartment listings. She's already found the most charming little flat near the Latin Quarter. Mom's voice warmed with pride. Just think, she'll be having fresh croissants every morning, visiting all those wonderful museums. My hands started shaking so badly I had to press them flat against my thighs. The medical folder crinkled under my grip, Dr. Patel's neat timeline suddenly blurring before my eyes. This wasn't some misunderstanding, some timing mix-up we could sort out over coffee. They'd made their choice. Remember how I mentioned I keep records? Decades of careful notes about family finances, about who contributed what and when. Funny how your mind grabs odd details in moments of shock. Standing there, I could picture exactly which folder in my home office held the proof of every paycheck I'd handed over when Dad lost his job. Every loan that helped cover Lindsay's undergraduate credits. The neighbor, Carol from 3 doors down, must have asked something about the cost, because Mom's voice rose again. "Oh, we've been saving for this. It's such an investment in her future, you know? She's got such potential." My future was measured in months now, not potential. I pressed my palm against the doorframe, steadying myself. The porch light clicked on automatically. I'd installed the motion sensor myself last Christmas, another item on my endless, reliable daughter checklist. Time stretched like taffy as I stood there, my shadow stark against the white door. Inside, Mom was still painting pictures of Lindsay strolling along the Seine, portfolio tucked under her arm like some romantic movie scene. The same Seine that my parents' promise, my lifeline, had just been tossed into without a ripple. I looked down at my medical folder, smoothing out the wrinkles I'd crushed into it. Dr. Patel's timeline stared back at me in clean, brutal typeface. Critical intervention required within 6 months. My hand rose to the door almost without my willing it. One knock. Gentle, like I used to use when bringing Mom tea during her migraines. The conversation inside stuttered to a halt. I stepped into the doorway, evening light at my back, medical folder clutched against my chest like a shield. Mom stood frozen by the phone, face caught between welcome and worry, while Carol perched awkwardly on the edge of our old floral sofa. The lemon polish smell was stronger inside, mixing with the coffee scent from their after-dinner cups. Everything looked so normal, so unchanged, like my world hadn't just shattered on their welcome mat. Mom's smile faltered when she saw my face. "Elaine, we weren't expecting you tonight." She shot Carol an apologetic glance. "We were just catching up about Lindsay's master's program." I heard. My voice came, out steadier than I expected. $80,000 for the Sorbonne. That's quite an investment. Carol gathered her purse, reading the room. I should get going. Thanks for the coffee, Margaret. The front door clicked shut behind her, leaving just the tick of Mom's beloved grandfather clock marking time in the foyer. I placed my medical folder on the console table, right next to the bowl where they'd always tossed their spare change. How many times had I raided that bowl as a teenager to buy Lindsay's school supplies? "You promised to help me." I opened the folder, pointing to the surgeon's estimate. 6 months. That's what I have to get this done. 6 months before. Now, don't be dramatic. Dad's voice cut in from the den doorway. He stood there in his reading glasses, newspaper creased in one hand. "We'll figure something out." "You already figured something out." I tapped. The calendar dates Dr. Patel had circled in red. The exact amount I needed for surgery, you sent to Paris, for art history classes. Mom twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit I'd seen 1,000 times. "Lindsay's been working toward this opportunity for years. We couldn't just let it slip away?" The words tasted bitter. "Like you're letting my chance slip away?" "That's not fair," Dad said, setting his paper aside. "Your sister needs this to build her future. You're established. You have resources." I laughed, and it sounded wrong even to my ears. "Resources?" I handed over half my paychecks for years to help this family. I covered Lindsay's undergraduate textbooks. I paid the property taxes when you lost your job. My finger jabbed at the medical estimates. Now I need help to literally stay alive, and you choose her master's degree instead? "You're strong, Elaine." Dad's voice held that familiar note of certainty, the tone that had always ended discussions in our house. "You'll find another way." There it was, the family script I'd heard my whole life. Elaine's strong. Elaine can handle it. Elaine doesn't need help like Lindsay does. Only now they weren't using my strength to pile on more responsibilities. They were using it to deny me life-saving care. Mom stepped forward, hand outstretched. "Sweetheart, we can look at payment plans, maybe." "No." I gathered the papers, sliding them back into my folder with shaking hands. "Thank you for the clarity. I've been wondering where I stood. Now I know." "Don't be like this," Mom pleaded. "We're family." Family. I paused at the door, that word hollow in my chest. Is that what we are? The porch light I'd installed cast harsh shadows as I walked to my car. Behind me, the door stayed closed. No running. Footsteps. No calls to wait. No last-minute change of heart. Just silence and the smell of lemon polish drifting through the evening air. I sat in the driver's seat, listening to the seatbelt chime ping softly. The dashboard clock read 8:47 p.m. 180 days. That's what Dr. Patel had given me to secure the surgery, and every minute sitting here was another minute lost. My hand shook as I turned the key. The engine hummed to life, and with it came a single, crystal-clear thought. If family wouldn't help me live, I'd have to help myself. 7 days. I'd give myself 7 days to find the money. Starting tomorrow at dawn, I'd try everything. Loans, second job, selling whatever I could. The dashboard clock ticked to 8:48 p.m., and I put the car in reverse. 179 days, 23 hours, and 12 minutes left to save my own life. I watched the sunrise paint my kitchen wall, coffee going cold beside my laptop. Ever tracked how many moments tick by in 6 months? I had 4,120 hours to somehow conjure up more money than I'd ever seen in my life. You'd be amazed how that knowledge can strip the color right out of a morning. The fundraiser page took 3 drafts. How do you tell strangers you're worth saving without sounding desperate? I broke down every cost like I was presenting a business proposal, surgical fees, hospital stay, post-op care. Added scans of Dr. Patel's letters, insurance denials, everything to prove this wasn't some scam. Hit publish at 6:43 a.m., just as my first alarm usually went off. My work phone buzzed, Sarah from HR returning my message about overtime. "I can get you 4 extra hours Tuesday and Thursday," she said. "Maybe some weekend coverage if Melissa's maternity leave starts early. But that's all I can promise right now." "I'll take it." I scribbled the hours in my planner, already calculating the extra pay. "Thank you, Sarah." The morning blurred into spreadsheets and phone calls. Remember how department stores used to have those fancy coat sections? I'd saved up for years, bought myself one good piece each Christmas. Now they were just entries on my items for sale list, hanging in garment bags by the door. Funny how quickly investment pieces become just fabric when your life's on the line. The first lender called me back at 10 a.m. "With your credit score, we can offer $25,000 at 21% APR. I felt my throat tighten. And the others? Medical credit line caps at $30,000. Personal loan, maybe $15,000 if we can verify your overtime hours. Even maxed out, all 3 wouldn't cover half the surgery. I added the numbers to my spreadsheet, watching the shortfall column grow wider instead of smaller. Know that feeling when you're running up a down escalator? That's what these calculations felt like. My fundraiser pinged. First donation, $50 from someone named Anonymous. Then another, $25, $100, small mercies dropping into my virtual bucket. But alongside them came the bills, $430 for pre-op blood work, $250 specialist consultation, $175 cardiac clearance. Each one auto-scheduled to pull from my account. At midnight, each one eating into whatever progress I'd made. By sunset, my kitchen table looked like a war room. Credit applications spread like fallen soldiers, calculator showing casualties in red digits. The small victories column, approved overtime, early coat sales, fundraiser trickle, felt like bringing a water pistol to a wildfire. My head throbbed. You know those migraines that start at the base of your skull? The ones that feel like your brain's trying to escape? That's what 6 months of survival math does to you. The phone rang just as my banking app chimed midnight. Unknown number, probably another billing department. I stared at the screen, watching it light up against the darkness of my kitchen. The auto payments would be hitting now, one after another, like clockwork. Precise, inevitable, unstoppable. Through my window, I could see my neighbor's medical alert bracelet, catching porch light as she watered late-blooming mums. That bracelet probably cost what I'd raised today. 1 day down, 179 to go, and I was already falling behind. The phone kept ringing, bills kept posting, and somewhere in Paris, my sister was probably choosing which museum to visit tomorrow, without any idea that her tuition had cost me my shot at survival. I reached for the phone, fingers hovering over accept. When you're drowning in numbers, even unknown callers start looking like potential lifelines. But what were the odds this one would actually help? About the same as my current calculations, adding up to salvation, I figured. The screen flashed one last time before going dark, leaving me alone with my spreadsheets and the quiet tick of auto payments draining my accounts. The phone kept ringing. On the 7th ring, I answered. "Ms. Kincaid?" A man's voice, crisp and professional. "This is Marcus Wheeler from First Capital Solutions. We've reviewed your application for medical financing." My heart picked up speed. "Yes, we can offer terms, but we'll need substantial collateral. Do you own your home?" I sank into my kitchen chair, No, I rent. Any property? Vehicles with clear titles? Just my leased Honda. The same one I'd been making payments on for 3 years. I see. His disappointment crackled through the line. Unfortunately, without assets to secure the loan, we can't help. Have you considered? I hung up before he could suggest another dead end. You know those moments when reality hits like a physical weight? That's what no collateral felt like. Another door slamming shut. The pawn shop off Marion Street hadn't changed since I was a kid. Same fluorescent buzz, same fingerprinted glass cases. Remember, those jewelry boxes our grandmother kept? The ones lined with worn velvet? I had one just like it in my purse, heavy with the few good pieces I'd collected over the years. The owner, gray-haired and squinting, barely glanced up when I entered. I slid the velvet pouch across the counter, trying not to think about birthdays and graduations as he sorted through my past. Gold's down this week, he said, separating the pieces. Best I can do is $850 for the lot. $850. Not even enough for a month of my maintenance meds, but what choice did I have? I nodded, signed his form, and walked out with cash that felt too light for what I'd given up. The mail was waiting when I got home. 2 postcards peeked out between bills, both with French stamps. My hands shook as I pulled them free. There was Lindsay, laughing by the Seine, her scarf caught in a perfect Paris breeze. Living the dream, her note bubbled. You wouldn't believe the pastries here. The second showed her at the Musée d'Orsay, posed thoughtfully before Monet's water lilies. Art history is amazing. Miss you. XOXO. I set them beside my pill organizer, the one with little compartments marked AM and PM, each section a reminder of time passing. The fundraiser total blinked on my laptop, 2,347 hours after 3 days. Not bad. Until you divided it by 6 months of medication, let alone surgery. The pharmacy's number was on speed dial. Jenny, the evening tech, knew me by voice now. Refill for Kincaid, I said. Running low on the maintenance set? She clicked her keyboard. That'll be $763.42 with your coverage. My throat closed. The pawn shop money would barely cover it, leaving nothing for next month. When do you close? 9 tonight, but we need payment at... Pick up, Ms. Kincaid. Your account shows... I know. I'd been floating payments between cards. Thanks, Jenny. The wall clock read 7:43 p.m. Each tick felt like a countdown, not just to closing time, but to everything: medication, surgery, survival. Lindsay's postcard smile seemed to mock me from the counter. While she studied masterpieces, I was selling off pieces of my life just to stay alive. I laid my phone next to the pill organizer, where only 2 evening doses remained. The pharmacy would close in 77 minutes. The pawnshop cash sat in my wallet, enough for 1 refill but nothing else. Tomorrow's dose would be there if I went now, but what about next month? What about the month after that? Through my kitchen window, I watched the sun set behind the pharmacy's sign 6 blocks away. The neon 24-hour promise was a lie. They'd lock those doors at 9 sharp, and with them, my access to the medication keeping my organs functioning. My chest felt tight, each breath shorter than the last. Was this anxiety, or were my symptoms getting worse? The clock kept ticking. 7:46 p.m., 74 minutes until closing. I stared at the phone, the postcards, the dwindling pills, trapped in the geometry of impossible choices. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who plans their own exit. But there I was, 3 days after, pawning my jewelry, sitting in a sterile consultation room at the clinic, asking about DNR forms. The social worker, Ms. Chen, according to her badge, kept her face carefully neutral as she pulled the paperwork from a manila folder. This is just a preliminary discussion, she said, sliding the forms across the desk. You don't have to decide anything today. But we both knew why I was there. The fundraiser had stalled at $2,500. The overtime, hours weren't enough, and last night I'd had to choose between dinner and my evening medication. You ever notice how hunger feels different when it's not by choice? Take your time, Ms. Chen said, standing. I'll give you some privacy to review everything. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving me alone with fluorescent lights that buzzed and flickered like they were as uncertain as I felt. The form lay there, crisp and official, with neat little boxes to check and lines to initial. Ever notice how death can look so organized on paper? I picked up the soft-tipped pen they'd left, one of those cheap office ones with the cap chewed at one end. Someone else had sat here before me, probably just as scared, just as alone. The thought made me pause, remembering all those times I'd helped Mom organize her paperwork, how she'd praise my neat handwriting and attention to detail. Mom. Right. Now she was probably on the phone with Lindsay, comparing notes about French architecture or planning which museums to visit when they flew over for Parents' Weekend. I could hear her voice so clearly. Oh, the lectures are fascinating, darling. And the campus. You should see the historic buildings. The fluorescent light stuttered again, casting strange shadows across the DNR form. My hand trembled as I uncapped the pen. This was what being strong meant, right? Making the hard choices so others wouldn't have to? Taking care of the messy details while they lived their dreams? The clock on the wall read 4:17 p.m. In a few hours, I'd need another dose of medication. The refill deadline loomed. Tomorrow morning, the pharmacy would start calling, asking about payment arrangements. I'd already rehearsed what to say when they did. The signature line waited at the bottom of the page, blank and final. I lowered the pen, watching a tiny drop of ink bloom where the tip touched paper. One signature, and it would be done. No more scrambling for funds, no more disappointed phone calls, no more watching the calendar count down to 0. My chest felt tight, each heartbeat thundering in my ears. Was this really strength, or just surrender dressed up in paperwork? The ink spread slightly, creating a small dark circle where my hand shook against the page. Just then, my phone vibrated in my purse, screen lighting up with silent urgency. I almost ignored it. What was one more no at this point? But something made me look. The name on the display stopped my breath. Evelyn, mentor. I hadn't heard from Evelyn since college, 20-some years ago. She'd been my academic advisor, the one who pushed me to take business law courses when everyone else said I should stick to practical classes. She'd retired from teaching years ago, moved to Arizona or New Mexico, somewhere with endless sun and red rocks. The pen slipped from my fingers, rolling across the unsigned form as my phone buzzed again. That dark spot of ink where I'd almost signed looked like an accusation now, or maybe a warning. Remember how I said timing is everything? Well, sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humor, or maybe perfect timing. Here I was, literally one pen stroke away from giving up, and suddenly there's Evelyn's name on my screen, clear as day. The light stopped flickering, steady now as my phone vibrated a third time. I stared at Evelyn's name, remembering how she used to say, "The hardest problems need the sharpest minds." She'd believed in me when being strong meant being smart, not just surviving. My hand moved from the DNR form to my phone. The fluorescent hum seemed to hold its breath as I reached for the answer button. 2 hours later, I sat across from Evelyn in Morgan's coffee house, where the evening crowd had thinned to a handful of regulars. The place hadn't changed since my college days. Same rustic wooden tables, same vintage coffee grinders mounted on exposed brick. Even the sound of ceramic mugs clinking against saucers took me right back to study sessions and career planning talks. Evelyn hadn't changed much either. Still had that sharp look in her eyes, like she could see right through any excuse you might try. Her silver hair was shorter now, but she wore the same kind of tailored blazer I remembered, with reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. "You look tired, Elaine," she said, stirring a spoonful of honey into her tea. The scent of cinnamon from the bakery case drifted over, mixing with the rich coffee aroma that always filled this place after sunset. I wrapped my hands around my mug, letting the warmth steady them. It's been a rough few months. You ever notice how saying something out loud makes it more real? I need surgery, expensive surgery, soon. How soon? 6 months, Well, 5 months and 12 days now. I pulled out my phone's calendar, showed her the red circles counting down. Insurance covers part, but I'm still short by, I swallowed hard. By about 80,000. Evelyn's spoon clinked against her cup. The same amount your parents just sent to Lindsay? My head snapped up. How did you? Small towns, long memories. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a slim manila folder. And I still have friends at the courthouse. She laid 3 photocopied documents on the table between us. The paper was crisp, official-looking, with dates from nearly 40 years ago. I leaned forward, squinting at the formal language until certain phrases jumped out. Trust, established for medical needs of the elder daughter. To be maintained until disbursement for documented health requirements. Primary beneficiary, Elaine Margaret Kincaid. My hands started shaking again, but not from exhaustion this time. I don't understand. What is this? Your grandmother's final gift to you. Evelyn tapped the first page. She set this up before she passed. A medical trust specifically for you. Your parents were named trustees. She slid another paper forward. A recent bank statement showing a transfer of exactly $80,000 to an international account. The cafe seemed to tilt sideways. All those careful folders at home, receipts, bank statements, emails I'd saved out of habit, suddenly felt like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known I was solving. They couldn't have. But even as I said it, I knew. How many times had they praised my strength while coddling Lindsay's potential? How often had they redirected my needs to her wants? They could, and they did. Evelyn's voice was gentle but firm. The question is, what are you going to do about it? She outlined the legal options, explaining terms like breach of fiduciary duty and emergency injunction. There were deadlines, procedures, forms to file before the money vanished completely into French tuition payments. But you need to move fast, she said, tapping her watch. Courts can freeze accounts, but only if there's something left to freeze, and you've got that surgery timeline to consider. I stared at the trust documents, at my grandmother's signature preserved in fading ink. A lifetime of being the strong one felt like it was crumbling around me, but maybe being strong meant something different now. Evelyn. My voice cracked a little. I cleared my throat and tried again. If we do this, if we file everything tomorrow, will it be enough? Can we win in time? I was waiting at the courthouse steps before dawn, clutching an expandable file folder that held 20 years of careful record-keeping. You know those moments when your whole life seems to pivot on a single decision? This was mine. Evelyn pulled up in her silver Volvo just as the sky started turning pearl gray. She looked ready for battle in a charcoal suit, carrying a sleek leather briefcase that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Ready? I nodded, though my stomach was doing somersaults. The morning air had that crisp edge that reminded me of first days of school. Same nervous energy, same feeling that everything might change by sunset. First stop, filing clerk, Evelyn said, guiding me through security. Then we notify their attorney. Her heels clicked purposefully on the marble floors, and I hurried to keep up. The clerk's office smelled like old paper and coffee. A fluorescent light buzzed overhead while we waited for our number to be called. I spread out my documents on a side table. Every email, every receipt, every bank statement I'd saved. 20 years of being the responsible one was about to pay off in ways I'd never imagined. Window 3, the intercom crackled. Evelyn handled the technical parts, terms like emergency injunction and temporary restraining order rolling off her tongue. I stood beside her, answering questions when needed, initialing where indicated. With each signature, I felt the weight of being the strong, silent daughter falling away. 8 weeks, I whispered to myself while we waited for copies. 8 weeks until my surgery deadline. The calendar in my phone showed the countdown in harsh red numbers. Every day mattered now. By mid-morning, we were climbing the steps to Bradbury & Wells, my parents' law firm. Their office suite screamed old money, all dark wood and leather chairs. The receptionist's smile never reached her eyes as she took our papers. Jim Wells himself came out to accept service. I remembered him from church, picnics, and charity auctions, always laughing at my father's jokes. Today, he wouldn't meet my gaze, just signed the acknowledgement form and disappeared back into his corner office. "Good," Evelyn said as we walked out. "Now we wait for the hearing date." But waiting wasn't in my playbook anymore. I had parallel tracks to manage, keeping my health stable, maintaining my work schedule, and building our case. Every evening after my shift, I'd spread my files across my kitchen table, organizing exhibits while my dinner got cold. My fundraiser page kept pinging with questions. Why do you need so much? What's the real story? I answered each one the same way. Legal proceedings are pending, full transparency coming soon. Some donors withdrew, others doubled down, sensing drama. I tried not to check the total too often. The expedited hearing request went in on a Tuesday. I spent that whole day jumping every time my phone buzzed. Finally, around 4, Evelyn's name flashed on my screen. "We got a date," she said without preamble. "Next Thursday, 9 a.m., courtroom B." I did the math instantly. Still 7 weeks until my surgical deadline after that. Not enough cushion to feel safe, but maybe enough to make a difference. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, straightening my best blazer. The woman, staring back, looked older than I remembered, tired around the eyes. But there was something else there too. Determination, maybe. Or just the knowledge that I had nothing left to lose. At the courthouse, Evelyn reviewed our strategy one last time while we waited in the hallway. The marble bench was cold through my skirt, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Down the corridor, I spotted Jim Wells huddled with my parents. Mother's face was set in that familiar, disappointed frown. Father studied his shoes. "All rise," the bailiff's voice echoed through the heavy doors. "Case number 2023, CV 4891, Kincaid versus Kincaid, now entering." The doors swung open with a sound like thunder. Evelyn squeezed my arm once, and we stood. 20 years of receipts, 8 weeks until surgery, and one chance to make it right. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. You ever notice how time moves, differently in courtrooms? The clock on the wall seemed frozen while the bank officer droned through his testimony, but my heart was racing like I'd run a marathon. I sat at the plaintiff's table, trying to keep my hands still in my lap while Mr. Chen from First National explained trust management protocols to the judge. His gray suit matched the walls, and his voice had that careful, measured tone that bank people use when they're trying not to make waves. "And can you confirm the transaction dated March 15th? Evelyn asked, pointing to a highlighted line on the document camera. The image projected onto a screen behind her, numbers sharp enough to cut. Mr. Chen adjusted his glasses. "Yes, that's correct. A wire transfer of $80,000 was initiated to an account at Crédit Agricole in Paris." Mother's handbag creaked as her fingers tightened on the leather. I remembered when she'd bought it, a treat for herself the same week I'd asked for help with my first round of medical tests. Funny how some memories stick with you. And the trust stipulations regarding permitted uses? Evelyn's question hung in the air. The trust was specifically designated for medical needs of the grantor's elder daughter. Mr. Chen glanced at me briefly. "That's Ms. Elaine Kincaid." A murmur rippled through the gallery. I recognized a few faces from our neighborhood, the same people who'd heard Mother bragging about Lindsay's European adventure. Their whispers felt like static electricity in the air. "No further questions, Your Honor." Evelyn sat down beside me. Father kept his eyes fixed on the defense table, methodically arranging and rearranging his pen and legal pad. I'd seen him do the same thing at business meetings when deals were going south. Some tells never change. The judge's expression had been neutral all morning, but now his mouth set in a hard line as he reviewed the exhibits. He'd been taking notes throughout. His pen scratching against paper was the only sound in the room for several long minutes. "Given the complexity of the trust documentation," he finally said, "I'll need until tomorrow to issue a formal ruling." He checked his watch. "We'll reconvene at 2 p.m. Counsel may submit any final briefs by noon. Mother's chair scraped against the floor as she stood. She wouldn't look at me either, but I caught her reflection in the window, that familiar disappointed frown now tinged with something else. Fear, maybe, or just the reality that her carefully maintained image was cracking. You know that feeling when you're close to finishing something huge, but there's still one more hurdle? That's what hit me as I walked out of the courthouse into the late afternoon sun. One more day shouldn't have felt so heavy, but time wasn't on my side anymore. I found a quiet spot on a bench and called Dr. Patel's office. The hold music looped twice before Jessica, his surgery scheduler, picked up. "Hi, Jessica. It's Elaine Kincaid. I'm checking on scheduling that procedure we discussed." Papers shuffled on her end. "Oh yes, Ms. Kincaid. Actually, I'm glad you called. We're finalizing next month's surgical calendar tomorrow at 4. Without confirmed funding, I'll have to release your tentative date." My stomach dropped. "Tomorrow at 4? Yes, I'm sorry. We have other patients waiting for that slot. Do you have funding secured?" I watched shadows lengthen across the courthouse steps. 24 hours. The judge's ruling wouldn't come until 2, which left exactly 2 hours to get everything processed. If the ruling went my way at all, I should know about funding by tomorrow afternoon, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Could you hold it until then? Please?" Jessica sighed sympathetically. "I'll do my best, but I have to be fair to other patients. 4 p.m. is absolutely the latest." After hanging up, I sat there watching people leave the courthouse. Normal people with normal problems, heading home to normal evenings. Meanwhile, my entire future had narrowed to a 24-hour window. I pulled out my phone to text Evelyn about the new deadline. The screen reflected my face, and I noticed I was wearing the same determined expression I'd seen in the mirror that morning. Funny how you can look exactly the same when everything's different. The next morning, the courthouse felt different. Maybe it was the way sunlight slanted through the tall windows, or how the wooden benches had filled with familiar faces from town. You know how news travels in small communities, especially the kind that makes people question what they thought they knew about their neighbors. I smoothed my skirt and checked my watch. 1:58 p.m. Every tick of the second hand felt like a hammer blow. "All rise." The judge settled into his chair, adjusting his reading glasses as he surveyed the packed gallery. His stack of papers looked dauntingly thick, but his expression was resolute. "Having reviewed the evidence and final submissions," he began, "this court finds clear and convincing proof that the medical trust established for Elaine Kincaid was improperly diverted." He paused, looking directly at my parents. "The court hereby orders an immediate freeze on all associated accounts, pending full repayment of the misappropriated funds." Mother's sharp intake of breath cut through the quiet. I remembered all those charity galas where she'd worked the room, voice dripping with practiced generosity as she wrote checks for other people's causes. Now that carefully crafted image was shattering like fine china on hardwood. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "upon repayment, the trust will be placed under court supervision, with disbursements restricted to documented medical expenses for the intended beneficiary." He shuffled his papers. "The full order is being processed now. We're adjourned." The gallery erupted in whispers. I caught fragments. "Can't believe they'd choose Paris," and "their own daughter's life." Each murmur was another crack in my parents' social foundation. Father stood quickly, tugging at his tie as if it were choking him. Mother's hands trembled as she gathered her things. Neither looked at me as they hurried past. "We need to move fast," Evelyn said, gathering our files. "The bank closes at 4. Walking through town to the bank felt surreal. On the hardware store's porch, old Mr. Peterson was telling Mrs. Riley about the court case. Their heads bent close, voices carrying just enough for me to catch, always bragging about sending money to Lindsay. Outside the cafe, a cluster of Mother's Bridge Club friends fell silent as I passed, their expressions a mix of shock and something like shame. You ever notice how a town feels smaller when everyone's talking about the same thing? The bank manager was expecting us. He reviewed the court order twice, his fingers drumming an anxious rhythm on his desk. "This is unusual," he said finally. "But executable today?" Evelyn pressed. He nodded. "Given the court's emergency provision." His fingers flew over his keyboard. "There. The funds are being reversed into the trust account now." I checked my phone. 3:08 p.m. My hands were shaking as I dialed the surgical scheduler. "Surgery scheduling. This is Jessica." "Jessica, it's Elaine Kincaid." I tried to keep my voice steady. "The funding's being processed right now. Can you still hold that slot?" Papers rustled. "Let me check. Yes, we still have next Thursday open if payment posts today." She paused. "But Elaine, I have to have confirmation by 4. 3:12 p.m. I looked at the bank manager. "How long for the hospital transfer? Once the reversal completes?" He studied his screen. "Maybe 15-20 minutes for processing?" I nodded to Evelyn, who slid the hospital payment authorization across the desk. The manager began entering details, each keystroke echoing in the quiet office. 3:25 p.m. The reversal completed. 3:33 p.m. Transfer initiated. 3:47 p.m. Still processing. I watched the second hand sweep past numbers on the wall clock, each tick carrying the weight of my future. The manager kept refreshing his screen, waiting for the confirmation to appear. You know those moments when time seems to move like cold molasses? When each breath feels like it takes an hour? That's what those minutes felt like, watching that clock, waiting for either salvation or devastation to arrive in the form of a simple computer notification. The bank manager's computer chimed. My heart nearly stopped. "Transfer confirmed," he announced, printing the receipt. "The hospital should have it now." My fingers trembled as I dialed the scheduler. "Jessica? It's Elaine again." "Perfect timing. I just got the confirmation from finance." The relief in her voice matched mine. "Let's get you scheduled for next Thursday. Surgery check-in will be at 6 a.m. I scribbled the details on the back of an envelope while she outlined the pre-op instructions. No food after midnight. Clear liquids until 4 hours before. Which medications to stop when. Each note felt like another step back toward life. You know that feeling when you've been holding your breath underwater and you finally break the surface? That's what this moment felt like. "I'll email your full packet," Jessica said. "Do you have someone to drive you home afterward?" "Yes. My neighbor Carol already offered." The same Carol who'd overheard Mother's Paris announcement that night. Life has a way of coming full circle, doesn't it? Back home, I pulled out my medical files. The DNR form was still there, unsigned, a reminder of how close I'd come to giving up. I created a new folder labeled "Not Needed" and slipped it inside. Some papers are better kept as memories of battles won. The next week passed in a blur of pre-op tests, blood draws, EKGs, chest x-rays. Each one, another box checked toward Thursday. I caught myself touching the hospital bracelet they'd given me during registration, running my finger over the printed date like a talisman. I texted Evelyn the night before. "Thank you doesn't begin to cover it, but thank you." Her response came quickly. "Some debts don't need repaying. Just live well." The morning of surgery, Carol picked me up while stars still dotted the sky. The hospital halls were quiet, just the soft squeak of nurses' shoes and the hum of floor cleaners. They settled me into pre-op, where warm blankets and beeping monitors created their own kind of comfort. "Count backward from 10, the anesthesiologist said, adjusting my IV. I made it to 7. When I surfaced, the recovery room smelled of saline and warmed blankets. My throat was sore from the breathing tube, but that first deep breath, God, it felt like inhaling spring. Itself, clean, clear, full of possibility. "How are you feeling?" A nurse appeared, checking my vitals. I nodded, still too groggy for words. She smiled, adjusting my oxygen. The monitors beeped steadily, a mechanical lullaby marking each restored heartbeat. Through the fog of post-op medication, I found myself imagining a garden. Not the meticulous rows Mother had always insisted on, but something wilder. something that hadn't existed before, full of plants I'd choose myself. The image was hazy, probably the drugs, but it felt like a promise. The recovery room lights dimmed as afternoon faded to evening. I dozed, woke, counted the neat line of sutures visible beneath my gown, dozed again. Each time I opened my eyes, there was a gentle nurse checking monitors, adjusting blankets, helping me take small sips of water. When dawn came, it crept in through narrow blinds, painting stripes across my blanket. The night nurse was finishing her rounds, her voice soft as she updated her replacement. "Good morning," the day nurse said, checking my IV. "How did you sleep?" I looked at the sunrise painting the sky outside my window. The pain was there, sure, but underneath it was something bigger, the rest of my life, stretching out before me like an empty canvas. "I slept," I told her, "like someone who gets to wake up again tomorrow." 6 weeks after surgery, I stood in my front yard with a terracotta pot cradled in my arms. The morning dew hadn't burned off yet, and my sneakers were getting damp from the grass I'd watered earlier. But some things are worth getting your feet wet for. You ever notice how the simplest actions can feel like declarations of war or peace? That's what planting this rosebush felt like, my own private peace treaty with the future. I'd chosen a spot, right beside the stoop, where the morning sun would hit it best. The hole was already dug, dark soil piled neatly on a tarp beside it. My neighbor Carol had helped me prepare the ground the day before, neither of us mentioning how her gossip had first alerted me to my parents' betrayal. Funny how life works sometimes, isn't it? The rosebush was young but hardy, with healthy stems and tight buds promising blooms. I'd picked it specifically for its resilience. The garden center clerk said it could withstand harsh winters and summer droughts. Kind of like me, I suppose. As I worked the plant free from its pot, I couldn't help thinking about how thoroughly my parents' carefully crafted image had crumbled. The court order freezing their accounts had been just the beginning. The real damage came from the whispers that followed. "Did you hear? I'd overheard Mrs. Peterson tell her bridge club on her porch last week. They chose their younger daughter's Paris degree over saving their eldest's life. Can you imagine?" The story had spread through our small town like wildfire. Mother had stopped attending her charity board meetings. Father's golf buddies suddenly had full foursomes without him. Their pillars of generosity reputation, built over decades of calculated public giving, had shattered overnight. I lowered the rose bush into its new home, remembering how Lindsay's latest postcard arrived yesterday. No exclamation points this time, just a terse note about cutting her program short due to family circumstances. The trust repayment had apparently interrupted her Parisian dreams. "There you go," I murmured, packing soil around the roots. My surgical scar twinged as I leaned forward, but it was healing clean and straight. The physical therapist said I was ahead of my schedule. The morning air carried the scent of fresh earth and possibility as I tamped down the soil. I'd chosen this spot carefully, visible from my kitchen window where I had my morning coffee, but also from the sidewalk where neighbors walked their dogs. Not to show off exactly, but as a quiet reminder, life finds a way to bloom, even after frost. A stake came next, driven deep to support the young plant until its roots could take hold. Just like Evelyn had done for me, come to think of it. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo of the freshly planted bush, its first bud just beginning to unfurl in the morning light. The pink petals were barely visible, but they were there, proof of life and renewal. I sent the photo to Evelyn with a single word: home. Her response came quickly. Beautiful beginning. She was right. This was a beginning. Standing there in my damp sneakers, watching that single bud strain toward sunlight, I felt the truth of it deep in my healing bones. The rose would grow here, marking seasons and surviving storms. Its roots would spread beneath the soil, anchoring it against whatever came next. I rested my hand on the stake, feeling the rough wood under my palm. The morning had that perfect crystalline quality that makes you want to seal moments in amber. A breeze ruffled the rose's leaves, and I found myself whispering to it like sharing a secret. Some roots thrive after betrayal. The bud nodded slightly in the wind, as if agreeing. And maybe it was just the morning light playing tricks, but I could swear those tightly wrapped petals loosened just a bit more, preparing to open fully when their moment came.